Kaitlin Bennett is the face of libertyhangout.tv. They started their own website so they could post their videos that don't quite meet up with YouTube's terms of service. A lot of the shit they say is quite white nationalisty. It's kind of reactionary. It's racist. It's transphobic. It's homophobic. A lot of what they say in their videos directly breaks terms of service, which is why they had to make their own website that you have to pay to watch their full videos on, and can only release clips to YouTube that fit inside of terms of service. This is the problem that Red Ice TV had a while back, which is why they're no longer on the platform, because the things that they were saying were straight up Nazi shit. I covered one of their videos previously that got re-uploaded to YouTube by a different user. But yeah, Red Ice TV got removed from the platform because of their extremist views that they were putting out. The same thing is happening-ish to Liberty Hangout, which is why they moved off platform and created their own website, which is hidden behind a paywall, so you have to financially support them to be able to watch their content, which I find funny. But this one is Kaitlin Bennett destroys BLM radicals. These people don't look like radicals to me. But let's see what she has to say. Let's take a look at this and see how well her arguments hold up.
Think AutoZone deserved to be looted and burned to the ground?
Well, it is a big corporation, and they have insurance.
Can you give me...
So, right off the bat, we're going with the AutoZone clip that went viral at the beginning of the BLM protests during the riots that broke out in Minneapolis right after the murder of George Floyd. Come to find out, the person that smashed the windows of that AutoZone was actually part of a white nationalist group who was an agent provocateur that came to the protests and, in some areas of it, riots, to stir up trouble, to make BLM look bad. Fancy that. It wasn't actually BLM that did it, but she's not gonna talk about that. She's just going to try and characterize that action with the entirety of the movement as a whole, despite the fact that about 94% of all BLM protests across the country have been 100% peaceful, and the majority of those that weren't, the violence was instigated by the police, and a very small amount of violence has actually been perpetrated by members of the protests, members of BLM itself.
Give me the definition of systemic racism.
I don't know the exact definition. I don't read the exact definition of
So you don't know the definition?
So this is what Kaitlin Bennett does. She goes to college campuses unannounced and just kind of picks people that are walking around that aren't prepared, that don't have any sort of prepared arguments, any sort of prepared rebuttal to anything that she's going to say, and tries to get them into a gotcha. And when you ask somebody, can you give me a definition of systemic racism? Most of the time, the only definition they'll accept is one that comes from Webster or from Merriam, or from any sort of, or dictionary.com, something that's like written down in a book, despite the fact that the definition of systemic racism is a little bit more amorphous and can't be summarized in one or two sentences. But basically, systemic racism breaks down to there are systems in place in our country that disadvantage people of color, and black people in particular in this nation, that need to be corrected, such as discrimination within policing and in the justice system, redlining that is still occurring in America, despite the fact that redlining was officially outlawed. It still takes place. Discrimination in the workplace, things of that nature that directly impact the lives of people of color, black people in particular in our country, that need to be addressed. And it's built into a system, into the system that runs our country. A lot of the times when people talk about systemic racism, it's coupled with the topic of police brutality and policing in this country. Black neighborhoods being over-policed, so of course they have higher rates of crime. White neighborhoods are under-policed, they have lower rates of crime, and white perpetrators are undercharged. So of course they have lower rates of violent or higher level crime, because if you commit a crime but don't get charged for that crime in particular, you're going to have a lower charge put at you, and that, working into the statistic that a lot of these groups go with, makes it seem like white people don't commit as many violent crimes. It's like if you're speeding and you get pulled over and you get issued by a citation for speeding, and then you go to court and the judge decides to lower it to just a seatbelt violation. Well, then you don't get put into the pool of the statistics for excessive speed violations in the country, because your charge got reduced to a simple seatbelt violation. That kind of concept, but applied to violent crime in the country. But that's kind of my understanding of systemic racism, is the inequity in the system that has been baked into how our country has been run for the last 400 plus years.
Definition, but you're going to tell me that it exists.
Yes, it definitely does.
Okay. So where is a systemic issue? Where is a law that's in the system? Where's a policy that's in the system of systemic racism in our...
So right here, this is what these people try to do. You have to, they demand that you point to them a law on the books that is racist, despite the fact that there aren't any outright racist laws on the books. The way that laws are interpreted and enforced by law enforcement and the Justice Department make them racist. The fact that black people are arrested for a marijuana usage and marijuana possession at higher rates than white people in this country, despite the fact that both based on surveys, use marijuana at about the same. That is an example of systemic racism, even though the law isn't arrest black people for weed. It's not written into the law. It's how the law is implemented that makes it racist. And these kind of people demand that you point to a law that has racism in the wording, otherwise it's not valid.
in our country?
I don't want to talk anymore.
And that she is very smart for walking away. She's very smart for not engaging with them, because it's very clear based on the way she just phrased her question that Kaitlin Bennett is operating in bad faith with that argument, as I just explained.
What do you guys think of the Black Lives Matter riots? Are they good, bad?
She refers to them as riots. That's something we need to be very, very critical and very examinatory of her language here. She's only going to refer to them as riots. When she talks about systemic racism, it has to be in the wording of the law, things of that nature. I'm sure there's going to be more inside of this video, but that's what she's going to do.
I think they're well deserved, because there definitely is a lot of systematic racism still in the country.
You think AutoZone deserved to be looted and burned to the ground?
Well, it is a big corporation and they have insurance, so it should be like, I can't speak on that because I'm not black, and I can't say what's right and what's wrong because I don't experience the racism that they do.
So
that's true. I mean, you can have an opinion on it, but the voices that we should be listening to when it comes to the Black Lives Matter movement, systemic racism in our country, should predominantly be the people that are affected by it. The reason that I speak out about it, even though I'm white, is because I have a certain privilege in our society that when a white guy says something, people are more likely to listen. So because I have that privilege, I choose to weaponize it and use it to affect change that would benefit people other than myself. Because I don't suffer from systemic racism, but when I talk about it and make points about it, people are more likely to listen to me about it, because I'm white and because I'm male. But yes, the people that we should be listening to are definitely the people that are affected by it directly.
because you're not black, you can't say that AutoZone and their workers didn't do anything to deserve to be burned to the ground?
I can't say how other people feel. It's not me experiencing the racism.
If someone came to your home, burnt your car, took your money, burnt your house down, would you say, well, I can't tell them what's right and wrong because I'm not black, I don't know how that feels?
This is a false equivalency here. There's a difference between personal property and private property. If someone came to your home and burned it down, that is not the same as someone going to a national corporate chain business and causing damage to it in order to speak out about a larger issue. Now, as I said before, the AutoZone in particular, that was done by a member of a white nationalist group as an agent provocateur. So the fact that she's zeroing in on this without bringing up that fact speaks a lot to her style of argumentation. She's arguing in bad faith again.
No, because then at that point it becomes personal.
Okay.
But at their point, it's their personal note of what's happening.
Is it not personal for the manager or the workers that work there for their stuff to be destroyed?
No, it's not, because it's not their stuff. It belongs to the capital owner. It belongs to the bourgeoisie that owns AutoZone. the people that work at that AutoZone, even the store manager of that AutoZone, even if it was destroyed by Black Lives Matter activists instead of a white nationalist agent provocateur, the store manager of that AutoZone doesn't own any of that. It's not their property. So no, it's not the same.
Workplaces to be burnt to the ground. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes.
But they'll be compensated. You won't be compensated if your house burned down, but they'll be compensated from the company.
True. That's what the insurance is for. This is why everybody brings up the idea of, oh, is it fair to the Target to be burned down? Target has insurance for all of the merchandise in their store as well as the building itself. The ability to compensate their employees' wages if they choose to. They probably won't, but they have the ability to do that as a national corporation. Even without insurance, Target could, and the CEO even tweeted about this, saying that I'm a billionaire, something along the lines of, I'm rich, I can afford it, this is more important than what happened to my store. Target as a national corporation can afford to compensate those workers and to rebuild that store. You as an individual might not have the financial capital to replace your home if somebody comes and burns down your personal property.
We don't
Do you know how insurance works? I mean, have you investigated that? Are you like for sure that's going to happen? They're good with the
I guarantee you don't know either, but you're trying to zero in on something that they don't know to make them look stupid.
riots?
They have insurance. Like if they were to have a regular fire, they have insurance. So they can support their workers. If they're a good company, they'll do that.
Do you have insurance?
Yes.
So it's okay if someone comes up and just smacks you in the face or knocks a tooth loose or breaks your
Another false. This is another false equivalency. There's a difference between burning down and looting a corporate store with business and personal assault. There's a difference between assaulting someone's person and destroying a corporation's property. And that, again, wasn't even committed by Black Lives Matter activists.
your nose. You can go have insurance. Well, I don't know. That's what people felt like doing because of racism. Because you have insurance, it's okay.
But that's not what's happening.
That is what's happening.
No, it's not. She is absolutely correct. This young lady right here, she may not be the best rhetorician in the world, and that's not her fault. She's been caught off guard by this media personality that has media training. This person, I'm going to venture to guess, doesn't, and yet she's standing her ground very well against this media-trained individual that is arguing in bad faith, and she's calling it out right here. She may not be doing it the best way, but you can't expect that from some random person out on a college campus. She's doing a very good job as a layperson fighting back against bad faith arguments and bad faith argumentation and somebody drawing false equivalencies.
They're hurting people.
But they're going up to big companies. They're not going up to you in the street and beating you down. They're going up to big companies that have...
No, they aren't doing it to me because I'm not in the middle of these riots, but they are going up to business owners, black and white, and they're killing them in the streets.
No, they're not. No, they are not. There's a statistic. There's a statistic floating around that Black Lives Matter has caused $8 billion worth of property damage and killed 36 people. That is false. There have been 36 people that have died in connection with these, but that was not done by Black Lives Matter activists. The majority of them were counter-protesters, coming to these events, causing trouble and driving their cars into lines of protesters and people defending themselves, and that person ended up dying, shooting into crowds of Black Lives Matter protesters and being fired upon in return and being killed, or Black Lives Matter activists themselves being killed both by the Proud Boys and the white nationalists that come and shoot at them, or by law enforcement directly. Black Lives Matter, as far as we've been able to determine, has not led to the direct death of any single individual that wasn't a result of self-defense.
In Portland, a man almost lost his life because he was just trying to protect a trans woman that was out there getting beat up.
She has to censor trans woman? Why? I get that you find trans people and the idea of transgender individuals as offensive, but the majority of society doesn't. You don't need to censor that, Kaitlin.
Up in these riots.
Yeah, and he was protecting them.
Do you think that trans women deserve that because they may have felt like they need to do that for racism?
They need to be protected.
So what doesn't deserve to be looted or burned down because of racism? Can you tell me the fine line? So corporations, yes, mom and
These things aren't being burned down because of racism. So the reason why looting and rioting happens is because for generations, black people in this country have been abused and kept back by the systems in place, and that has led to a buildup of frustration. It comes to a boiling point, and an event happens such as the killing of George Floyd, the assault on Jacob Blake, or I forget his name, but the jogger that was killed by the three white racists in their pickup trucks. Things like that happen and cause this pent-up frustration for decades, for in many cases centuries, that is built up to come to a boiling point and finally explode over, and people lash out in frustration. And some things do get caught in the crossfire. But by and large, the damage is caused to large corporations or businesses that have insurance and do not cause any direct harm to any specific individual. They're lashing out against the system in place, not against individuals. They aren't burning down Targets because racism.
And pop shops, no?
Yeah, small businesses no, because they don't have the insurance that AutoZone does.
So what is it about insurance that makes something okay to burn down? What's this magical word insurance that makes it okay to destroy property?
Well, nothing makes it okay to burn down.
But
it's a fact of like
the matter what it represents.
What does AutoZone represent in this Black Lives Matter discussion?
It represents the bourgeoisie that has been the capitalist class that has generationally oppressed black people in this country. And again, AutoZone was done by a white nationalist.
What does auto represent to you? What does it represent to you?
It's a company that someone built. They have workers there that need that to pay their bills and put food on the table for their family. That's what that represents. It represents a company that I can go to consensually and purchase things that I would need, and in return, I'm paying somebody's salary to be able to provide for their family. That's what that represents. How does AutoZone being burnt down factor into a Black Lives Matter discussion?
Okay, I want to ask you, if you had a kid and they went to go get something from the convenience store, but they never came back because someone accused them of stealing, which wrongfully accused just because they looked suspicious, would you be mad if your kid didn't come home from the convenience store?
Sure would. Would you be upset if your...
No, answer the question and then let her continue. You're going to cut her off because you know she's making a point you can't argue against. This is what she's doing. We're calling it out.
workplace got destroyed because someone was upset?
We're not talking about
racism?
We're talking about racism. And what happens...
What does convenience store and Skittles and what is it, an Arizona iced tea have to do with racism?
What does... Okay, so she's pointing in a bunch of elements of previous shootings by police. These kids that were murdered by the police while carrying a bag of Skittles and Arizona iced tea were shot by the police for being black, honestly. For the crime of being black in America, they ended up not coming home. That's what that has to do with it. That's what, and I find it funny that she brings up these things for the sole purpose of triggering the people that she's talking to, because she knows what happened there was wrong, but she has to try and deflect from the current conversation and move it in a different direction. She's pivoting right now because she knows this young lady right here was in the process of making a point that she couldn't argue against.
That's not the point of it. It's the point, it's what it represents. If my son did not come back from a convenience store, I'd want to burn something down too. I'd be upset, but we're not ones to invalidate or validate their feelings towards racism.
Oh, absolutely. We can definitely invalidate their actions. Their feelings are one thing, but you can invalidate someone's actions when they're burning down entire cities and killing people.
No, there has not been a single entire city that has been burnt down. There's been a couple of businesses that have burned down, all of which have insurance, but there haven't been entire cities. These people on the right love to try and characterize the Black Lives Matter movement as burning down cities. Portland is on fire, is what we keep hearing out of right-wing news media, that they're destroying these cities, despite the fact that the Portland protests take up about 6 blocks of an entire metropolitan area. No city is being burnt down by these movements
In the streets because of racism. Something that isn't an issue. Because they say there's systemic racism. Can you get me an example?
A black man can go and try and get a job. But if a white man applies for that same job, that white man is more likely, depending on the company, to get the job.
That's not true.
No, that is true. You're lying, Kaitlin.
Because do you know what?
Let me guess. She's going to bring up affirmative action. She's going to bring up affirmative action and say affirmative action made racism illegal.
Affirmative action is?
You don't miss. Holy shit. Okay, so affirmative action was implemented to try and solve the problem of racial discrimination, but it did not fix the problem entirely. It was implemented to try and address the inequality. And the people on the right like to point at that as a form of reverse racism, where they're discriminating against white people, when in reality it's an attempt to reduce discrimination against people of color in corporate environments.
And diversity hires, do you know anything about that? Have you ever heard of those terms?
You can say that your company's diverse and not actually represent it.
So organizations by law are required to hire certain races, ethnicities.
This is wrong. No, they are not required. Affirmative action does not mandate that a company has a certain number of black people and a certain number of Asian people and a certain number of white people. Affirmative action means that they cannot discriminate against black people in favor of white people based on their race or just their name on their application, despite the fact that that still happens. Affirmative action in colleges does that in a way, but the reason for that is because black people tend to come from lower socioeconomical conditions that would not afford them the best education in elementary, middle school, and high school, meaning that they would not potentially wouldn't have the education necessary to make it into some of the colleges in our country. And affirmative action is putting measures in place to allow more black students in, despite their lower quality education, because of the education they received as a child, because their schools are not as well funded as more affluent white people are. That's what affirmative action does.
Genders.
Have you heard of loopholes?
Sure have.
Companies go
Sure
through
have.
loopholes.
Sure have. I'm just really confused here. I'm kind of just...
She's pivoting. She just got called out, and now she's pivoting.
lost on this aspect of systemic racism. Can you give me the definition of systemic racism?
I don't know the exact definition. Okay. I don't read the exact definition of
So
system.
you don't know the definition, but you're going to tell me that it exists.
Yes, it definitely does.
Okay. So where is a systemic issue? Where is a law that's in the system? Where's a policy that's in the system of systemic racism in our country?
See, this is what I was talking about earlier. They want the dictionary definition. When you can't give that, you need to give them a law in writing where the wording of the law is specifically racist, and if you can't do that, then it doesn't exist, despite the fact that systemic racism does not speak to the wording of laws at all. It's the implementation of them.
I don't want to talk anymore. There is systemic racism, and
I would just love proof.
Read any article. Read any article.
You say that you don't look up and read definitions, though, so if you can't give me the definition, you can't give me any examples because you actually don't know what that means, and you're justifying the looting and the burning of our country? What?
There is no looting and burning of our country. Again, there have been a handful of buildings that have been set on fire. Yes. However, in my video that I uploaded previously called Let's Talk About 1350, and I'll link that at the end of the video, in the video, Let's Talk About 1350, I talk about how in Washington, D.C., black people are stopped by the police 4 times more than white people, and despite the fact that they are ticketed less, they are searched by police. I believe it was 3 times more than white people, despite the fact that white people in that area have higher rates of contraband being found on their person. Black people are still searched more, and despite the fact that that's not codified in the wording of the law, it's how the law is implemented that makes the racism in that area systemic, because the system of law enforcement in that area is using laws that are on the books in an inequitable way, in a racist way, to target people of color, black people in particular, in that area. That's just one example, and that's I went into greater detail, and I actually had the graphs up and the statistics on screen for you guys to look at if you want to go check out the 1350. By the way, if you're watching this on YouTube, drop a like, hit the subscribe button. I'd love to have your support. But anyway, let's get back to the video.
What's going on, guys?
What's going on with you? You don't think that black people are misrepresented?
I didn't say that. No, I think they're overrepresented. We have Black Lives Matter down the street on a public street right now. Why does that need to be there?
Why does it need to be there? It needs to be there because it is a massive movement trying to address a serious problem in the U.S. Justice system that you're refusing to admit it exists. And people like you are the reason why we need big movements and people holding signs and Black Lives Matter plaza in DC and large murals on the street saying Black Lives Matter. People like you are the reason why, Kaitlin. You're the reason why.
It doesn't need to be there. No one thinks black people don't matter. No one thinks that.
There are a lot of people in this country that think black people don't matter and would be much happier if they left. Yes, it's a big part of the reason why these things are happening. It's because there are people that believe that way in this country today in 2020.
There is no systemic racism in our country, and there is not a police brutality against black people in our country.
Yes, there is. Again, in my 1350 video, I went over the statistics about it. Black people are, I think it's 2.5 times, or no, it was 4 times more likely to be killed by police in America than white people, despite making a significantly lower portion of the population. There is a massive problem with police brutality against black people in this country. You just refuse to see it because it invalidates your narrative.
I don't like talking
That doesn't
to
exist.
ignorant people, so.
Ignorant people? You said that you don't even know the definition of something you think exists in our country. So this is...
She doesn't want to talk to you, Kaitlin, because you're arguing in bad faith and you're pivoting anytime she gets close to making a point you can't argue against. I would walk away too.
what leftists and black
And I love these I love debating right-wing chuds, and I would walk away because she's clearly debating in bad faith.
Black Lives Matter supporters do. So when you challenge them to give you proof for something, or you want just basic examples, just tell me the definition of something, they just walk off. When they actually encounter somebody who doesn't believe in their narrative, this is how they act. I guarantee you this girl has never been told to her face that Black Lives Matter is a terrorist organization.
It's not. You need to believe that it is so that you can keep thinking the way you do. Black Lives Matter is not a terrorist organization at all.
Police brutality against black people does not exist
Yes, it does.
statistically, like they're trying to tell us. And there is no systemic racism in our country. She's never been told that.
She has been told that, but she's tired of arguing with shitheads like you that argue in bad faith and are just simply uneducated on the topic deliberately. You are deliberately ignorant. Either you refuse to look it up or you have looked it up and are completely ignoring everything that you find because there are statistics and data that go against everything that you just said. Every point that she just made in this video, there is data and there are statistics from the Justice Department that directly contradict what she has to say. The data is on our side. You're just arguing from your feelings. You don't feel like there's systemic racism. You don't feel like there is a police brutality issue in this country. And that a lot of that has to do with the fact that you as a white woman don't experience it. People like that, like if I were in this situation, I would go very hard against her and she probably wouldn't use the footage because I would make her look like a fucking idiot. But two, after a while of her continuously arguing in bad faith, moving the goalposts and pivoting away from arguments that she knows she can't defend herself against, I would get frustrated and leave too. And I love these kinds of conversations. I love making people like this look like fucking idiots on the internet.
She's never been told that, but I really like how the man followed her along right there. That was good. That was good. All right.
They were clearly walking together. What, is he just going to let her walk away and just abandon her friend? They're clearly hanging out together. Perhaps they're in a relationship. I don't know. But it's not weird that he left with her. Even if they're just friends, that's not abnormal.
So if you would like more interactions like these.
Nope. All right, so the rest of this video is going to be her pimping her channel to us. Don't go to libertyhangout.tv because they make you pay for these kinds of shitty views. Like we just saw in this video. Again, Kaitlin Bennett, all she can do is argue in bad faith because she knows the data is not on her side. And when the data is not on their side, conservatives have to either pretend like they don't have the information that's readily available or pretend like that information is false and is a product of Marxist professors in the leftist brainwashing facilities known as colleges in our country. That's the kind of argumentation they go with. Kaitlin Bennett does it. Ben Shapiro does it. Steven Crowder does it. All of the right-wing media personalities online do these kinds of things because they know they don't have an argumentative or a data-driven position to stand on. But anyway, that was Kaitlin Bennett. Thanks for tuning in. Hit that subscribe button and hit the bell button. I upload twice a week. And hit the like button if you enjoyed it. That really helps us out with the algorithm. And we'll see you in the next one. Peace.